swear I thought it was just going to be another normal night. That's the stupid part. If I had even a hint of what Jonathan was about to suggest, I probably would have made some excuse and gone home early. But I didn't, and that's how everything started to change. The party itself was nothing special. Just one of those crowded apartment things, too many people, too much cheap alcohol, music that was a little too loud to talk over but not loud enough to dance to without feeling awkward. Jonathan and I had been best friends for years. We met in college and stuck together through boring lectures, bad relationships, and far too many late-night food runs. He was the kind of guy everyone liked without even trying, easy smile, confident without being overly self-assured, and always somehow in control of every situation. I was not that. I was the one people warmed up to slowly, the observer, the guy who noticed things. And lately, I'd been noticing him a little too much. That night, he was in his element, laughing, talking, leaning in close when people spoke, that effortless charm working on everyone around him. I stayed close, sipping my drink, pretending I wasn't watching the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders every time he moved. "Dude, you've been quiet all night," he said at one point, nudging my arm. I shrugged. "Just tired, I guess." He studied me for a second longer than necessary, like he didn't quite believe me. That was Jonathan. He always noticed more than people thought. "Let's get out of here soon," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "This place is getting boring." I laughed. "You were just talking to like 5 people at once." "Yeah, and none of them are you." That stuck with me. We left around midnight. The air outside was cool, quiet, a sharp contrast to the noise we just escaped. The streetlights cast that soft yellow glow, and for a second, everything felt slower, calmer. It was just the two of us walking side by side. "You want to come back to my place?" Jonathan asked casually. "I've got beers, and it's closer." "Yeah, sure," I said without thinking. That wasn't unusual. We'd hung out at each other's places 100 times before, watched movies, played games, crashed on the couch. Nothing weird about it. At least that's what I told myself. His apartment was quiet when we got there. He tossed his keys onto the counter, kicked off his shoes, and headed straight for the fridge. "Beer?" he asked. "Yeah." I leaned against the kitchen island, watching him move around like he owned the world, which, in a way, he kind of did. Or at least, that's how it felt when you were around him. He handed me a bottle, our fingers brushing for just a second. It was nothing, but I felt it anyway. We ended up on his couch. Some random show playing in the background neither of us was really paying attention to. The room was dim, just the TV lighting up the space in flashes. There was this quiet between us. Not awkward, just different. Jonathan took a sip of his beer, then leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head. His shirt lifted slightly, exposing a strip of skin, and I had to force myself to look away. "Can I ask you something?" he said suddenly. I glanced at him. "Sure." He didn't answer right away, just looked at me, really looked. And for the first time that night, I felt something shift. "I've been thinking about something lately," he said slowly, "and I don't know if it's stupid or interesting." I let out a small laugh. "That sounds vague as hell." "Yeah," he smirked. "It kind of is." Another pause. Then, "What would you say if I suggested we play a game?" I raised an eyebrow. "A game?" "Yeah," he said, sitting up a little, his tone more serious now. "Something different." I felt my stomach tighten slightly, though I couldn't explain why. "What kind of game?" He hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than anything else. Jonathan wasn't the type to hesitate, not unless it mattered. "Just something where we test boundaries a bit," he said finally. "Nothing crazy, just seeing how far we're willing to go." I stared at him. Half of me wanted to laugh it off. The other half couldn't ignore the way my heart had started beating faster. "You're being weirdly mysterious right now," I said. "Yeah, I know," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just don't want you to think I'm messing with you." That made it worse somehow. "Jonathan," I said carefully, "what kind of game are we talking about?" He met my eyes, and for a second, everything else faded: the TV, the room, the noise in my head. Just him. Something where we don't lie, he said quietly. And we don't back out once we agree. A pause. And where things might get a little uncomfortable. My throat went dry, because suddenly I understood. Not fully, but enough. And the worst part? I didn't want to say no. David, he added softer now. We don't have to. I just thought. He trailed off, watching me closely, waiting, and I realized this was one of those moments. The kind that splits everything into before and after. I should have said no. I should have laughed, grabbed my jacket, and gone home. Instead, I took a slow breath. What are the rules? Jonathan didn't answer right away. He just kept looking at me like he was trying to figure out if I was serious, or if I'd back out the second he started explaining. That alone made my chest feel tight. Okay, he said finally, sitting up straighter. But if we do this, we don't half-ass it. I let out a quiet breath. You're really selling it. He smirked, but there was something nervous underneath it. That was new. I'd seen Jonathan in a lot of situations drunk, angry, stressed but nervous. Almost never. That's kind of the point, he said. It's supposed to push us a bit. Push us how? Another pause. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, beer hanging loosely from his hand. We take turns, he said, asking questions or giving dares. I huffed softly. So truth or dare? Not exactly. He shook his head. It's stricter. Of course it is. He ignored that. No lying, he continued, and no backing out once you agree to play. If you refuse something, the game ends. No hard feelings, but we don't pretend we played. That word again. Pretend. Like whatever this wasn't just a joke to him. And the questions? I asked. Have to be real. Not surface-level crap. His eyes flicked up to mine. Stuff you wouldn't normally say out loud. My grip tightened slightly around the bottle. And the dares. This time he didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. You're serious about this? I said quietly. Yeah. Why? He let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, he admitted. I guess I just feel like we've been circling around stuff for a while. My stomach dropped a little. Circling around what? He looked at me again. And this time, there was no hesitation. You really don't notice it? That hit harder than I expected. Because I did. I just never thought he did too. I leaned back slightly, trying to play it off. Notice what? Jonathan let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. See, this is exactly what I mean, he said. We both do that. Do what? Act like we don't know what's going on. The room felt smaller all of a sudden. Or maybe it was just me. Okay, I said slowly. Then say it. He held my gaze. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then, there's tension, he said simply. My chest tightened. Between us. Silence. The TV flickered in the background, lighting up his face for a split second before fading again. I could have denied it. I should have. Instead, I exhaled quietly and muttered, yeah. Something shifted again after that, like we'd crossed a line just by saying it out loud. Jonathan nodded once, almost like he'd been waiting for that. Exactly, he said. So the game is just not ignoring it anymore. I swallowed. That's your idea of a game? Kind of, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. It's just a way to make it less weird. This is already weird. Yeah, he admitted. But at least it's honest. I stared at him, trying to figure out if this was a terrible idea. Probably was. Actually, it definitely was. Because this wasn't just some random guy. This was Jonathan, my best friend. The one person I couldn't afford to mess things up with. And yet, first question or dare? He asked. Just like that. No pressure in his voice, but everything in his eyes. You're not even gonna give me time to think about it? I said. He shrugged lightly. If you think too much, you'll say no. He wasn't wrong. That was the problem. I looked down at the bottle in my hand, watching the condensation drip slowly along the glass. Then back at him. Still waiting. Still calm. still way too sure of himself. Fine, I said. His expression shifted subtle, but there, like something clicked into place. Yeah? He asked. Yeah, I repeated, even though my heart was already racing. We play. A slow smile spread across his face. Okay. He set his beer down on the table. Then I'll start, he said. Of course he would. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my pulse kept climbing. Truth or dare? He asked. Thought you said it wasn't exactly that. It's not, he said. But it's close enough. I hesitated. Truth felt dangerous. Dare felt worse. Truth, I said finally. His smile deepened just a little. All right. He leaned back, studying me again like he was choosing carefully. Have you ever thought about me? He said slowly. As more than just your best friend? My breath caught. Of course that was his first question. Of course it was. No lying, he reminded me quietly. I let out a shaky breath, running a hand over my face. This was exactly why this was a bad idea. Because there was no safe answer. Not really. Yeah, I said finally, barely above a whisper, but loud enough. Jonathan didn't react right away. He just watched me, and somehow that was worse. How long? He asked. That's a second question. He tilted his head slightly. You can refuse. End the game. I clenched my jaw, then shook my head. A while, I admitted. I don't know. Months. Another pause. And you? I asked, forcing the question out before I could overthink it. He smiled faintly. That's not how this works. Yeah, I know, I muttered, still asking. He considered me for a second. Then, yeah, he said, just as quietly as I had. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a game anymore. Not even close. My turn, I said quickly, before the silence could get heavier. Jonathan nodded, leaning back again like he was completely at ease. Go for it. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. Truth or dare? He didn't even hesitate. Dare. Of course he didn't. I stared at him, my mind scrambling. I hadn't thought this far ahead. Didn't expect to get this far at all. Come on, he said, a hint of challenge in his voice. You started this too. I exhaled slowly, then said the first thing that came to mind. Stay where you are, I said. Don't move. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Okay. I leaned forward slightly, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. Don't break eye contact either, I added. Now he smiled. All right, David, he said softly. I'm listening. And that's when I realized I had no idea what I was about to do next. But whatever it was, there was no going back after this. I don't know what I expected in that moment. Maybe that I'd chicken out, laugh it off, say something stupid to break the tension. But I didn't. Jonathan was sitting there, completely still, eyes locked on mine like I'd told him to. No hesitation, no second guessing, just waiting. And that somehow made it worse. Or better. I couldn't tell anymore. David, he said quietly, you're stalling. I know, I muttered. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was in my throat. Every second that passed made it heavier, thicker, like the air itself was pressing in on us. Do it, he added, softer this time. Not a challenge. More like permission. I leaned forward, slowly, close enough that I could see every detail on his face, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his breathing had changed just enough to notice. Close enough that I could feel it too. That pull. That thing we'd both been pretending wasn't there. Don't move, I reminded him, even though he hadn't. I'm not, he said, just as quietly. His voice felt different this close. Lower, heavier. I hesitated for half a second, just long enough to realize this was it, that line, the one you don't uncross. Then I closed the distance. Not fully, just enough that our faces were inches apart. Close enough that if either of us moved even slightly, Jonathan's eyes flicked down for a split second, to my lips, then back up, and that tiny movement hit harder than anything else. You're messing with me, he said under his breath. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I'm not. Another pause. Neither of us moving. Neither of us pulling away. Then what are you doing? He asked. I swallowed. Seeing how far you'll let me go. His lips parted slightly. Careful, he said, almost a whisper. That goes both ways. Something snapped in my chest at that. Not in a bad way. Just clarity. Like all the hesitation, all the overthinking gone. Replaced by something simpler. I moved closer. And this time, I didn't stop. The moment our lips touched, everything else disappeared. No background noise. No thoughts. Just that. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy. It was careful. Like both of us were figuring it out at the same time. For a second, Jonathan didn't move. And I thought, that was it. I'd gone too far. Then his hand came up. Slowly. Resting against my arm. Not pushing me away. Pulling me closer. That's when it stopped being uncertain. The kiss deepened just slightly, not aggressive. Not overwhelming. Just enough to make it real. Too real. My chest tightened. My head spinning as everything I'd kept buried for months crashed to the surface all at once. And he felt it too. I could tell. When we finally pulled back, it wasn't sudden. It was slow. Like neither of us really wanted to be the one to end it. We stayed close. Foreheads almost touching. Breathing uneven. Okay, Jonathan said quietly. Not joking. Not casual. Just processing. Yeah, I replied. My voice didn't sound like mine. A small, almost disbelieving laugh left him. Well, he said, running a hand through his hair. That definitely counts as a dare. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Yeah. Another pause. But this one felt different. Not tense. Just heavy. Jonathan looked at me again. Really looked. You've wanted to do that for a while, haven't you? I huffed a quiet laugh, glancing away for a second. You already know the answer to that. Yeah, he said softly. I do. I looked back at him. And you didn't stop me. He held my gaze. No, he admitted. That silence again. But now it wasn't confusing. It was loaded. My turn, he said after a moment. Of course, the game wasn't over. If anything, it had just started. Truth or dare? He asked. I hesitated for half a second. Then, dare. His expression shifted instantly. Something sharper. More focused. All right, he said, leaning forward slightly. Then don't move. I blinked. That's my line. Not anymore. Before I could respond, he closed the distance. Faster than I had. More certain. And this time, he didn't hesitate at all. I barely had time to react. 1 second I was still catching my breath, trying to process what had just happened, and the next, Jonathan was already there. His hand came up to my jaw, firm but not rough, guiding me just slightly as he leaned in. This wasn't hesitant. This wasn't testing. This was him deciding. The kiss hit differently this time. Stronger. More certain. Like whatever line we'd crossed a few seconds ago, he wasn't just okay with it. He wanted more. My back pressed into the couch as he leaned closer, not overwhelming, but enough to make it clear he wasn't holding back anymore. And I didn't stop him. Didn't want to. It wasn't messy or rushed. It was controlled. But there was something underneath it now, something heavier than before. All that tension we'd been pretending didn't exist? It was right there. No filters. When he pulled back, it was quicker this time. Not because he wanted to stop. More like he needed a second to breathe. Okay, he exhaled, a small, almost disbelieving smile forming. I let out a shaky breath. Yeah, okay. We just stared at each other for a moment. And it hit me again. This was Jonathan, my best friend. The same guy I'd been joking with a few hours ago like nothing was different. And now, you're not even surprised, I said quietly. He tilted his head slightly. I think I've been expecting this, he admitted. That caught me off guard. For how long? He huffed a quiet laugh, glancing away for a second before looking back. Honestly, he said, probably longer than I should admit. Something about that made my chest tighten. because it meant this wasn't random. This wasn't just a drunk idea after a party. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked. Jonathan leaned back slightly, resting his arm along the back of the couch. Because I didn't know if I was reading it right, he said. And I didn't want to screw things up if I wasn't. I nodded slowly. Yeah, same. Another pause. But this one felt steadier. Like we weren't teetering on the edge anymore. We'd already jumped. Now we were just figuring out where we landed. So, he said after a moment, a small smirk returning. Game's still on. I let out a breath, shaking my head slightly. You're really sticking to that? You agreed, he reminded me. Yeah, I know. He leaned forward again, resting his elbows on his knees. Your turn, he said. Truth or dare? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to answer, but because now I knew exactly how much this could change things. Truth, I said finally. His eyes narrowed slightly, like he was choosing carefully again. All right, he said, then quieter. Have you ever wanted me to make the first move? That hit instantly. No build-up, no easing into it, just straight to the point. I let out a small, breathless laugh. You're not holding back anymore, huh? You said no surface-level questions, he replied calmly. Fair. I looked down for a second, then back at him. No lying, he added softly. I exhaled. Yeah, I admitted. My voice was quieter this time, less guarded. Jonathan's expression shifted again. Not surprised. More like something clicking into place. How many times? He asked. That's another question, I said, though there wasn't much resistance in it. You can stop any time, he reminded me. I held his gaze, then shook my head. More than I'd like to admit, I said. A slow smile spread across his face. Good, he said under his breath. That word did something to me, something I wasn't ready to unpack yet. My turn, I said quickly, needing to regain some control. He leaned back again, relaxed like this was the most natural thing in the world. Go ahead. Truth or dare? Dare, of course. I studied him for a second, really thought about it this time, because now I knew. This wasn't just about pushing limits. It was about revealing things. Okay, I said slowly. He watched me, waiting. Come closer, I said. He didn't hesitate, shifted toward me immediately, closing the space between us again. Closer, I added. His eyebrow lifted slightly, but he listened. Now we were almost exactly where we'd been before. Now what? He asked quietly. I swallowed, then said, stay like this. A pause. And don't look away. His lips curved slightly. All right? I held his gaze, felt that same tension building again. But this time it wasn't confusing. It was familiar. You ever think about this? I asked. He didn't look away. All the time, he said. No hesitation. No joke. Just the truth. That hit harder than anything else so far. Then why didn't you do anything? I asked. His jaw tightened slightly. Because I wasn't sure you wanted me to. I let out a slow breath. Then, without thinking too much about it. Now you know. Something changed in his expression again. Sharper. More certain. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. And the way he said it made it very clear. This game wasn't going to stay a game for much longer. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. We were just there. Close. Too close to pretend this was still casual, still something we could laugh off later. Jonathan's eyes didn't leave mine, and this time I didn't want them to. You're different right now, he said quietly. I let out a small breath. How? He tilted his head slightly, studying me. Less careful, he said. Like you're not holding back anymore. I huffed a quiet laugh. That's rich coming from you. Hey, he smirked faintly. I've always been like this. Yeah, I said. That's kind of the problem. His smile faded just a little. Not in a bad way. Just more serious. David, he said softer now. We should probably talk about this. I nodded. Yeah, we probably should. Neither of us actually moved away, which said a lot. "What does this mean for you?" he asked. Straightforward. "No games." That was Jonathan. I swallowed, leaning back just enough to think without completely breaking the moment. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've thought about it, yeah. But I never expected it to actually happen." "Same," he said. A pause. Then, "But I'm not exactly regretting it either." That made something in my chest ease. Just slightly. "Me neither," I said. And that was the most honest thing I'd said all night. He nodded slowly, like he needed to hear that. "Good," he said under his breath. Another silence settled between us. But it wasn't awkward. It was heavy in a different way, like we were both trying to figure out what came next. "So what now?" I asked. Jonathan leaned back, running a hand through his hair again. "That's the part one didn't think through," he admitted with a small laugh. "Seriously. I had a plan up until the game," he said. "Not after." I shook my head, smiling despite everything. "That's very on brand for you." "Yeah, I know." But then his expression shifted again. More focused. "Or," he added slowly, "we don't overthink it." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a terrible idea." "Probably," he said. "But it might also be the only way we don't ruin this." I hesitated, because he wasn't wrong. Overthinking was exactly how I usually handled things, and it rarely helped. "So what are you suggesting?" I asked. Jonathan looked at me for a second. Then, "We keep going," he said. "Simple. Direct." "As in the game?" I asked. "Yeah," he nodded. "But not just the game." That made my pulse pick up again. "You mean?" "I mean we stop pretending this is nothing," he said, cutting me off gently, "and just see where it goes." That sounded dangerously close to something real, and that was exactly what made it scary. "And if it messes things up?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately, just held my gaze again. "Then at least we didn't ignore it," he said. That hit harder than I expected, because deep down I knew ignoring it wasn't really an option anymore. Not after this. "Okay," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. Jonathan's lips curved slightly. "Okay?" he repeated. "Yeah." A small exhale left him like he'd been holding that in. "Then we keep going," he said. The air shifted again. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just charged. "Your turn," he added. I looked at him for a second, then smiled slightly. "Truth or dare?" "Dare," he said immediately. "Of course." I leaned a little closer again, not as hesitant this time. "All right," I said. "Then this time no rules." His eyebrow lifted. "No rules." I nodded. "Yeah." A pause. Then quieter. "Just don't stop me." For the first time that night, Jonathan hesitated. Just slightly. But he didn't say no. "Okay," he said. Low. Certain. And that was all I needed. Because now, it wasn't really about the game anymore. I didn't rush it. That was the first difference. Everything up until now had felt like we were testing something, pushing, pulling, seeing where the line was. But this time, it wasn't about the line anymore. It was about the choice. Jonathan didn't move, just like he said he wouldn't. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't passive. He was letting it happen, letting me decide. I shifted closer again, slow enough that he could stop me if he wanted to. He didn't, not even a little. "Still good?" I asked quietly. His answer came just as soft. "Yeah." A pause. Then, "More than good." That did something to me. Not in a reckless way, in a grounding way, like whatever this was, it wasn't one-sided. It wasn't confusion anymore. I leaned in again, but this time there was no hesitation on either side. No testing. Just familiarity that didn't make sense yet. His hand found mine without thinking. Not dramatic. Not forced. Just natural. And somehow that felt bigger than anything else that had happened. When we pulled back, we didn't go far. We stayed close, still in that same space we'd been orbiting all night. "This doesn't feel like a game anymore," I said quietly. Jonathan let out a small breath. Yeah, he agreed. I think we passed that point a while ago. I nodded. Then why are we still calling it one? He smiled faintly. Because calling it something real feels bigger. That was honest. Too honest. And that scares you? I asked. He didn't even try to deny it. Yeah, he said. A little. I leaned back just enough to see him clearly. For what it's worth, me too. That seemed to ease something in him. Not completely, but enough. So what do we do? I asked. Jonathan thought for a second, then shook his head slightly. I think we stop trying to define it right now, he said, and just be in it. That sounded simple. It wasn't, but it also felt right. Okay, I said. Another quiet moment passed between us, but now it felt steady, not fragile. Then he smirked slightly. So, does that mean I still get my turn? I laughed under my breath. You're really not letting that go, huh? Not a chance. I shook my head, but I was smiling. Fine. One more. His eyes lit up just a little at that. Truth or dare? I hesitated. Then, truth. He leaned in slightly closer again, and this time his voice dropped just enough to make my chest tighten. If I hadn't said anything tonight, he said, would you have? That question hit deeper than anything else so far. I looked at him, really looked. No, I admitted. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I figured. A pause. Then I added. But I would have kept thinking about it. That made him smile. Not the confident, effortless one he always had. Something softer. Good, he said quietly. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. This wasn't just a one-night thing. Not for me. And judging by the way he was looking at me now, not for him either. I didn't expect things to feel normal after that, but somehow they did. Not the same normal as before. Nothing about this was the same anymore, but there was something steady about the way we sat there afterward. Like the tension had shifted into something quieter. Something real. Jonathan stood up first. Beer? He asked, like we hadn't just changed everything. I let out a small laugh. Yeah, I think I need one. He walked into the kitchen, and I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling for a second. My mind was trying to catch up, because this wasn't just a moment anymore. It had weight now. You okay? He called from the kitchen. Yeah, I replied. Just thinking. Dangerous, he said, coming back with 2 bottles. He handed me one, our fingers brushing again. And yeah, that still did something. We sat down, this time a little closer without even acknowledging it. So, he said after a sip, we should probably talk about the obvious part. I raised an eyebrow. Which obvious part? He gave me a look. Come on. I exhaled slowly. Us, I said. Yeah, us. That word felt different now. He noticed it too. I could tell. This can't just go back to how it was, I added. No, he agreed. It can't. But it also can't just blow everything up, I said. Jonathan nodded. Exactly. A pause. Have you told anyone? He asked. I shook my head immediately. No. You? No. That made sense. This wasn't exactly something you casually bring up. And we're not drunk enough to blame this on that, I said. He huffed a quiet laugh. Not even close. Another silence. But this one felt heavier, more practical. Do you think this changes how we are around everyone else? I asked. Jonathan leaned back, thinking. Maybe not right away, he said. But eventually, yeah, probably does. I nodded, because there was no way it didn't. And what if it goes wrong? I asked quietly. That question hung there longer than I expected. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me. Then we deal with it, he said finally. That's not very reassuring. I know, he admitted. But it's honest. I let out a breath. Yeah, it is. Another pause. But I don't think it will, he added. I looked at him. Why not? He shrugged slightly, but his eyes didn't waver. Because we didn't rush into this, he said. We've been building toward it, whether we admitted it or not. That was true, and hearing him say it out loud made it feel less reckless. "So what are we now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "I think that's the wrong question." "Then what's the right one?" He leaned a little closer again. "Do you want this to be something?" "Straight to it. No hiding." I swallowed, because this wasn't part of a game anymore. There was no safety net here. "Yeah," I said. His expression softened. Not dramatically, just enough. "Yeah," he repeated quietly. "And you?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Yeah." That settled it. Not in a dramatic, life-changing declaration kind of way, but in a quiet, solid one. "Okay," I said. Jonathan let out a small breath, like something had just locked into place. "Okay," he echoed. We sat there for a while after that, talking about random things again, joking a little, letting things feel normal, even though they weren't. But every now and then, there were those moments. The way his knee brushed mine and didn't move away. The way we looked at each other just a second longer than usual. And it all felt different now. At some point, I checked the time. "Shit," I muttered. "It's late." "You can crash here," Jonathan said immediately. Then, after a small pause, "Like before." I looked at him. That wasn't a simple offer anymore. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Okay." We both knew. Nothing about tonight was like before. And as we got up, turning off the lights, heading toward his room, I had this quiet, steady thought in the back of my mind. This wasn't just the start of something. It was the point where everything we had stopped being simple. I didn't sleep much, not because I couldn't, but because my brain wouldn't shut up. Jonathan was lying next to me, not touching, not like earlier, just there, close enough that I could hear his breathing, steady and slow, like he'd managed to fall asleep without overthinking everything. I envied that. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over. The party, the couch, the game, that moment, all of it. And the more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. This wasn't something I could pretend didn't matter. "David." His voice cut through the silence. Quiet, half asleep. "Yeah," I whispered. "You're still awake." Not a question. "Yeah." A small shift beside me. Then, "You okay?" I hesitated, then told the truth. "I think so." That seemed to be enough. For a second, I thought he'd fallen back asleep. Then, "You're overthinking it," he murmured. I huffed quietly. "Obviously." A pause. "Come here," he said softer. I froze for half a second. Not because I didn't want to, just because of what it meant. Then I moved. Just a little, closing the space between us. His arm shifted slightly, resting lightly against mine. Not pulling, not forcing, just there. And somehow, that made everything settle. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said. I let out a slow breath. "Yeah." Another pause. "But this is real," I added quietly. This time he didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said. That word again. Simple, but solid. And for the first time since everything started, my mind actually slowed down. I don't remember falling asleep, but I did. The morning felt different. That was the first thing I noticed. Not awkward, not tense, just aware. Sunlight filtered through the window, and for a second, I forgot where I was. Then I turned my head, and there he was, Jonathan, still asleep. And just like that, everything from the night before came rushing back. I exhaled slowly, sitting up on the edge of the bed, running a hand through my hair. This was it. The after. No music. No distractions. No game to hide behind. Just reality. "You always wake up this early?" His voice came from behind me. I glanced back. He was awake now, watching me. "Yeah," I said. "Usually." He nodded slightly, sitting up. And for a second, we just looked at each other. Not confused. Not unsure. Just aware of what had changed. "So," he said, breaking the silence. "So," I echoed. A small smile tugged at his lips. "We didn't mess it up," he said. I let out a quiet laugh. Bold statement for 9 a.m. Hey, he shrugged. You didn't run out. That's a good sign. Yeah, I admitted. You didn't either. Another small pause. But things are different, I said. He nodded. Yeah. Are you okay with that? He didn't even need to think about it. Yeah. That made something in my chest feel lighter. Me too, I said. And for a second, that was enough. No labels, no pressure, just agreement. Jonathan stood up, stretching slightly. Coffee? He asked. Definitely. As he walked out of the room, I followed a second later. And it felt normal, strangely normal. But underneath that normal, there was something new, something neither of us was pretending wasn't there anymore. And as I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching him make coffee like we'd done 100 times before, I realized something. This didn't feel like the end of a crazy night. It felt like the beginning of something we'd been avoiding for a long time. And now, we weren't avoiding it anymore.